the guy that, spent a good 10 minutes having a written speech talking about how, the much the championship meant to him. I don't know why he went up there and talked for that long, but, that's a guy who has pretty steep pockets. So, so long as he's, funding this team and making sure that they have all the talent in the world, why not make a 10-minute speech, man? You're the one providing the money here. But I do want to talk about the Rays a little bit, man. I think it'd be interesting to talk about, kind of the move that they made to pull Snell. And this is a team that has an interesting series. I think we'd be remiss not to mention how good they were for the entirety of the season and in the postseason. So can you talk to me a little bit about the Rays and what you see for this team moving forward?
Yeah, big appreciation for the Rays. They definitely held their own against the Dodgers. At the end of the day, obviously the Dodgers came out on top, but they had some great hits. I think Snell shouldn't have been pulled. I think that was a bad decision. Honestly, he was being able to hold Mookie Betts. He held Muncy. He held Sweeney. I think that was a bad decision on the manager by the Rays side. But overall, the Rays did a great job. I think that they have a really, really bright future when it comes to winning and making the playoffs next year. So shout out to them.
Shout out to the Rays for sure. Something I think is really interesting is that Tampa Bay Lightning wins the Stanley Cup. LA Lakers win the NBA championship. So either way, you get a city that wins a championship twice in 1 year. And the Rays were right there. They made it to the World Series. And to me, they're very much that analytics, Moneyball, 2004 Oakland Athletics side of baseball. And it was cool to see them there. I don't think they'll get over that hump. And part of that is I think Mookie Betts shows baseball is moving in that direction where exciting players can have a really, really big impact on the team. And the Dodgers have heart. If you saw Mookie Betts jump up and catch the ball at the top of the fifth in Game 7 against the Braves to get to the World Series, I think that's what we're looking at as the future of baseball, getting these exciting players who can play at the highest level. So I like the Rays, but I think they might have reached their ceiling this year.
I 100% agree with you. Again, I've said this before. It seemed very reminiscent of the Los Angeles Lakers versus Miami Heat championship. Is that this team, the Rays, they took everything out of that team. They exhausted everything out of that team that they possibly could have, but it just wasn't enough to surpass some of these teams with a little bit more money and a little bit more influence and a little bit more talent. You know what I mean? The Tampa Bay Rays, again, hats off to him, hats off to Choi, hats off to all of the great ballers. Snell, he looked flabbergasted when he got pulled out of that game. The dude looked like, what are you doing, coach? You giving up one more hit and you pull me in this moment. And at that point, in the game, it just didn't make any sense to pull him at that point. The dude had pitched one hell of a game, and he was going to continue to pitch a really good game. And at that point, you have to throw all your chips into the basket if you're the Rays. And, if the guy's arm is tired, even then, you got to let him pitch a couple more times because your bullpen simply isn't that deep. You didn't have Glasnow available to you. So it was a really questionable decision to pull him. I agree with you that it was very analytics driven. But at the end of the day, man, managers make decisions, and this is going to be one that's going to be questioned for a long time. But I think the Tampa Bay Rays, they do have an opportunity to they don't have that much money, but I do think they'll be able to retain their guys, and assuming that they improve, perhaps they can reach to that echelon of winning a championship if those guys that are currently on that team continue to develop and get better. Brooke, what do you think? Help me out here. Skylar's disagreeing with me. I need your help here.
Look, honestly, I think the Tampa Bay Rays, they're going to be in the playoff picture next year. Like you said, I do think that they did reach their ceiling, but they've got great players. I think Snell, if he continues to pitch well and they build up their bullpen a little bit, I think they have a great chance of making the playoffs and being in the exact same seat they were this year. I think they've just got to go back to the drawing board and see where they can improve in the places that the Dodgers were just a little bit better. But I will not count the Rays out of being back in the World Series or any sort of championship next year. So, yeah.
It's analytics versus heart and hustle. And the Rays represent analytics, putting a team together with a low salary cap. I think that could become a dated model in baseball based on what we've seen with the Dodgers here and getting Mookie Betts and him coming in. This team, the Rays, they're really good. But I think the analytics approach is going out the window, and they've reached their ceiling this year. I'm sticking with that point. I like the Dodgers with heart and hustle, and I like the Padres to make it up eventually with heart and hustle. They have exciting young players. Baseball is becoming a more exciting sport again, and I think that's the future of the league, and I think that's why teams like the Rays will not necessarily make the World Series again, but lots of excitement in baseball. It's a wonderful time to be getting back into it, and a wonderful time for the Los Angeles Dodgers.
No doubt about it. I am getting word that we were actually missing audio at the very beginning of the show, so you might have heard me do a whole lot of this and not with hearing words coming out. So unfortunate for that. Our apologies on that, and hopefully everything is squared away now. But you mentioned analytics versus heart and hustle. That feels like the perfect segue into our next segment when we talk about Daryl Morey signing with the Philadelphia 76ers for a 5-year deal, joining Doc Rivers, joining Elton Brand, joining Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Y'all, what do you think this means for the 76ers? Is this the next evolution of the process, or perhaps the end of the process? Talk to me.
It is the next evolution in the process. As you just heard me say, I'm a firm believer in heart and hustle over analytics. However, in this case, the 76ers need a shakeup, and Daryl Morey is that shakeup. Yes, he only found regular season success with the Houston Rockets. However, I believe he is the right fit for this team because you have so much talent with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and something needs to be done. They need a drastic shakeup. They need a reach. And I believe Daryl Morey is that reach to give them the shakeup, because something is not working, and analytics may be the right approach to hone in on the skills of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and create the kind of spacing that this team needs.
Look, with Darrell and Doc Rivers, do we really think Doc Rivers and Darrell are going to work well together? I honestly am not convinced yet. With Doc Rivers coming off that huge choke with the Clippers this season, and with Darrell Morey coming from the Houston Rockets, only having one championship Western League final with the Rockets, at this point, if I had to decide right now, I don't think it's enough. I think Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle and Joel Embiid all have potential, but I'm not sure if working with Doc Rivers and Joel Morey is just going to be the best for the Sixers. I think it's definitely going to help, but I don't think it's going to be a drastic change to what the Sixers have going on right now.
I'm going to climb on my soapbox a little bit here. There's many that's going to call Daryl Morey a failure because of what happened in Houston and him never being able to surpass the Golden State Warriors, which, by the way, is probably the greatest roster ever assembled. There's going to be a lot of people who call Doc Rivers a failure because of what happened in Los Angeles and him not being able to get over the hump, him not even being able to take that talented team and turn that into a championship team. There's going to be many that call Ben Simmons a failure because the dude never was able to get a reliable jumper, still doesn't seem to have a reliable jumper. There's many who's going to call Joel Embiid a failure because he can't be the best player on a championship team as we've seen in the past. There's a lot of people who look at this 76ers team and see a lot of failures and a lot of dudes who are good but just can't get it done. But that's not what I see. When I look at Daryl Morey, and my roommate Eddie actually wrote a really good article about this for Annenberg Media. You guys should check it out. Eddie talked about how Daryl Morey, a lot of people like to attach analytics and math and calculations and all that to Daryl Morey, but Daryl Morey at his core is somebody who has an incessant need to win. And he will find every advantage possible to make that happen, not just by manipulating analytics and encouraging his guys to shoot layups and threes, but also by manipulating salary cap and by also manipulating ways to find guys and put them in positions to succeed and garner talent and make talent work, right? This is a guy who was able to swing Chris Paul, who was able to swing Russell Westbrook out of seemingly nothing because he was able to manipulate G League guys and manipulate, minimum contracts and turn those things into value. And now he has a lot of talent and a lot of value on that 76ers team, which he's going to be able to flip into more talent and value. I do think Joel Embiid's days are numbered. And when I look at a guy like Joel Morey, he seems like the perfect type of dude to take Joel Embiid and extrapolate all the value that he can out of him and get the guard that this team needs and move Ben Simmons into where he should have been the entire time as a big man rolling using the paint. So that's where I see the future of the 76ers team. I think Doc Rivers is going to be willing to get on board with that. So, I mean, yeah, I think that this team, they just got a whole lot better with Daryl Morey, and that this is going to be one heck of a future. It's going to be a messy one. That's why I'll say it's the end of the process, because Joel Embiid was the face of the process. When you see him get out the door, and mark my words, Joel Embiid, his days are numbered with the 76ers. When he leaves the door, that's the end of the process and the beginning of the 76ers contending for championships. I'm off my.
I love your take about Joel Embiid, Reagan, and his talent, and that this could be great for him. I'm not 100% sure he leaves the 76ers. He seems like one of those guys at heart, but he is a phenomenal player, and he needs someone like Daryl Morey to come in and spark it up. And Brooke, I totally understand what you are saying about Doc Rivers and the choke job. I think he got scapegoated a little bit. That's not to take all the blame off him, but Kawhi and Paul George did not step up. We all saw what Kawhi can do last year. They did not step up in the way they were supposed to. Something had to change, and Doc Rivers was the easiest decision to make in that case after all the assets the Clippers gave up for Kawhi and Paul George. Doc Rivers won in 2008 the championship with the Celtics. Since then, he's gotten to the playoffs. He did blow another 3-1 lead, just like this year, back in the Lob City Clipper days with Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin. However, this 76ers team, they all have the same mentality. They're all people who have proven they can be great, between Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Doc Rivers, and Daryl Morey. But they're all coming together now with the goal, hey, we've been on the outskirts for too long. And now is our time to step it up. I think that it is a reach to make these moves, but when you have the talent and you just can't get over that hump, look what the Raptors did with Kawhi Leonard. Speaking of them, they traded their best player, DeMar DeRozan, and fired the coach of the year in Dwayne Casey, bringing in Nick Nurse after LeBron left the conference. They didn't even give it a try, but they won the championship.
Here's my thing, Skylar. Is I agree with you. They are in a desperate situation 100%. And you don't bring in a guy like Daryl Morey unless you're about to shake something up. You don't bring in a guy like Daryl Morey and say, let's keep the same product and let's keep the same recipe and expect different results. They're going to have some different things happen. And you don't bring in a guy like Daryl Morey unless you're willing to shake some things up. And I think that shake up comes in the form of Joel Embiid. I'll never ever say that Joel Embiid is not a talented basketball player. I'll never say that I think Joel Embiid can't be a championship player. But knowing Daryl Morey and knowing the style of basketball that he likes to have his teams play, Joel Embiid doesn't have a spot on that team. So I think that he trades Joel Embiid for the guard that they need and uses Ben Simmons as the big man.
Look, I still don't know about Doc Rivers, though. Have the LA Clippers ever made it past the Western League Finals?
No.
With all of Doc Rivers, with all of his head coaching jobs, has he been able to get the Clippers to finally be able to make to the NBA Finals? I see an issue there. Like, I know at the end of the day, like, the players sometimes have to go through and perform, but there's a coaching standpoint from that way too. Is Doc Rivers going to be able to bring that over to the Sixers and have that same effect on the Sixers? I know Daryl Morey obviously is going to be able to make a big impact on the Sixers, but I'm still with Doc Rivers. I'm not sure if that was the best decision with the Sixers making, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things are going to shake up, and I'm actually really excited to see what's going to happen with the Sixers and if Doc Rivers can finally come through, because that was just never the case at the Clippers. So
it depends if he can recreate that 08 Celtics magic was right. Already 12 years ago.
12 years ago, that's a long time.
Doc Rivers does have it in him, and I love Joel Embiid. He can shoot the three. He can do spacing. So I believe there is something that Daryl Morey can do with him, but it's going to be interesting to see. It's a huge shakeup. It's a huge reach, and this is their only hope after the process, or else things are going to need to be shaken up even more. But clearly, 5-year deal, they want Morey as their man.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Now, I do need to come at you. You came from my guy, Doc Rivers, here. And the thing is with Doc Rivers, he was in such a sticky situation down there in Los Angeles, right? You come in, you're already the coach, and they come in and they bring in Kawhi, who's obviously had his whole thing with the free agency. He's coming in with Paul George, and they're dictating the show. Doc Rivers is a culture guy. He's somebody who's establishing a culture and making sure players are fighting for each other and love each other and have each other's back. The guy who was setting the culture down there, that wasn't Doc Rivers. It was by nature of the way things operated in the offseason. They had to have Kawhi Leonard set the culture. And that's why that team didn't come to fruition, is because Kawhi Leonard was setting a lethargic culture, a culture that really didn't care, a culture that, was willing to take some games off, a culture that, at the end of the day was ultimately their downfall, because even in the waning moments against Game 7 in the Denver Nuggets, did we ever see that team truly care? That's why that team failed. It wasn't because of Doc Rivers.
Agreed.
So Doc Rivers, for me, I love the guy. I think he's coming into a situation with the 76ers that is a team that's in desperation, and he can take advantage of that and establish a strong culture. But Brooke, any last words before I move on?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Doc Rivers, he's got a lot to prove for me. I'm being a Lakers fan and looking at the Clippers. It's been a tough couple years for them, so I'm rooting for him at some point, but I'm excited to see what he's gonna do in the process, and hopefully the Sixers can get something going.
Not
just a tough couple of years, but a tough couple of entire NBA history for the Los Angeles Clippers. But Skylar, I know you have a hot take for us, so I'll let you have the floor, man. Go ahead, hot take it up.
It's a very hot take. There is something special going on in Los Angeles right now after the year they've had. The Los Angeles Dodgers have won. The Los Angeles Lakers have won. And let's go. The USC Trojans are winning the National College Football Championship. They need to make the playoffs first. That is the big thing, okay? But if they make the playoffs, which I think they will with the personnel they have, they can go all the way because it's a new season. They need to prove themselves in this 7 games, but it is not just about Keaton Slovis here. They have so much talent in the backfield. Stephen Carr is ready to go. The coach, Mike Jinks, the running backs coach was saying that he has increased his vertical 5 to 6 inches. Studying former USC running back Ronald Jones in the offseason, they have 4 potential starting running backs. Their backfield is so talented. Todd Orlando on the defensive end has told this team he wants to bring in a championship mentality. He has a championship mindset with defense. He's getting them to play a physical brand, and the coaches have been saying that this whole Zoom thing has given them more chances to get to know each other before and install those packages and be ready, and that all the coaches, Graham Harrell, the new offensive coordinator, Todd Orlando, the new defensive coordinator, and of course, Coach Clay Helton, they've never seen a group like this in such a special season. I believe that USC has the talent and the personnel beyond just Keaton Slovis, who's the obvious bright spot here, to go all the way and bring Southern California one more championship.
I agree with everything you just said, but you're wrong. You're wrong. Because the thing is, right, they do have all of the talent in the world. And I've been caping for this team for a very long time because it seemed like the stars were aligning for this to be the year. And it would have been the year had they been able to play a full schedule. But let me tell you something about the College Football Playoff Committee. They have a very, 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 very incessantly strong bias against Pac-12 football, just like the rest of the country outside of Pac-12 football.
Yes, sir.
I'm from the South. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I know how people who don't play in the Pac-12 perceive the Pac-12 to play. Just for an example, this Alabama game that they would have played at the beginning of the season, you ask anybody outside of USC, USC was about to get trounced by Alabama, regardless of how talented this team was, just because people don't view Pac-12 football as up to standard. They view it as subpar. They view the Pac-12 as the worst of the Power 5 conferences. So regardless of how well USC plays this season, the fact that they're only playing other Pac-12 teams, I guarantee you everybody in the College Football Playoff Committee, they're just going to be sitting back, well, like, of course they beat Arizona State. Of course you beat Arizona. Of course you beat Oregon State. Of course you even beat Oregon. They all suck to everybody who's not in the Pac-12. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but it's the reality that we live in. People don't have respect for the Pac-12, so I don't even think they'll have the opportunity to go compete as much as I believe that they deserve that opportunity.
Look, I think that they have a chance to make the playoffs for sure. Without having to beat Oregon without Justin Herbert is going to be hard for Oregon this year. I think USC is looking strong with Keaton Slovis. We got Keaton Christian. We got Stephen Carr. We got a bunch of wide receivers that can make up Michael Pittman's spot. I think USC is looking the best they have in a couple years. I know this season's unfortunate with only a 6 to 7 game season, but I think how it's slating up, they're able to go 6-0 easily. And the playoffs are going to be interesting to watch. I think I do have to mention that Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, of course, are always looking strong with Trevor Lawrence and Danny Sweeney. Of course, Trevor Lawrence, potential Heisman winner, first-round draft pick in the NFL. I think you cannot overlook that guy. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy for the Trojans to even get into the playoffs or even have a chance to win, but I'm not counting them out at all.
I like it, Brooke. Here's what the Trojans need to do. Reagan, you bring up some great points about the bias on the Pac-12. So what the Trojans need to do and what I believe they can do, they will go 6-0, like Brooke was saying.
They have to.
But they need to dominate in those performances. They need to show out, and I believe that the USC Trojans have the mentality, the championship mentality, especially with these new offensive and defensive coordinators in Todd Orlando and Graham Harrell. We know coaching is more important in college football than it is in the NFL, to dominate these teams that are not that great. And if they can dominate teams in the Pac-12, the cream rises to the top. And the committee will have to take a look at USC. And once they get there, Clemson's amazing. Trevor Lawrence, you cannot discount them. They're unbelievable.
When has the College Football Playoff Committee ever shown that they had respect for teams who dominate what they view to be subpar teams? Look at UCF in years past. UCF has been undefeated in times, and in the College Football Playoff Committee still said, we're good on that. They played some subpar teams. I believe in this Trojan team. I think that given the opportunity, they could easily go and compete some of those teams that are going to be in the College Football Playoff. But I'm looking at the way and the precedent that's been set by the Playoff Committee. They're just not going to have any respect for what USC does this season regardless. Their foot was shot before they even stepped on the field. That's the sad reality for this Trojan team, because it is the most talented team that we've seen in a while, and they could have gone and won a championship, but they will never get the opportunity because of the bias against the Pac-12, man. I'm sorry to say it, but it's just that's the way these things work, man. If they don't play what other teams or what other analysts view to be really good teams, then they'll never have the opportunity. Their only saving grace might be Oregon, but even then, I don't think that'll be enough.
There's one word to describe this year. Unprecedented. And that is why I think that they can overlook in this specific year. If they dominate the 6 or 7 games, I think that benefits them, that there's less games for the Trojans and for the Pac-12, because you can't ignore a whole season. It's a short body of work. And if it is an explosion in that short body of work, it is an unprecedented year, and all of this could go out the window. USC gets into the playoffs and makes some more Southern California magic happen in this crazy year of 2020.
Yep. It's 2020. You can't decide that. I think USC has a good chance. I think we need another championship, just like Pete Carroll had back in the early 2000s. Oh, yeah. I think if they really show out, like you said, Skylar, if they really dominate in the 6 to 7 game season, I don't think they're going to be able to be ignored. Going off of what Reagan said, I do think it's obviously still possible with just being completely excluded from the college football playoff. But I think what USC can do is just do their best and show out and completely show that the Pac-12 is one to be working with.
If they get to the playoffs,
look at the way that they've judged this team prior to them playing games, right? They barely snuck into the top 25, and this is a top 10 talented roster according to the 247 composite rankings. They're a top 10 talented roster in the country. They barely snuck into the top 25, and they hadn't even played any games yet. They have to, like you said, absolutely obliterate every team that comes in their path, and that's just a high standard to set, man. Like, especially when we're talking about a group of guys that, you know, they are taking this burden on for the entirety of the season. They cannot mess up not one time. They cannot have one off game, not even an off quarter. And that just seems too unrealistic for me, man. That you're asking too much of this team to go ahead and compete for a college football championship. Again, they should have been able to do it, but because of the circumstances that they were dealt, it's just not going to be able to happen.
The shortness of the season is what benefits them to potentially not make those mistakes. You bring up some great points. It's going to be really tough, but they have a short season. They have enough of a window to obliterate teams. And if they mess up at all, it's not going to happen. But if they need to get in the playoffs, Reagan, you're bringing up a great hurdle here. They need to get in the playoffs.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's their first step.
Totally, Brooke. If they get in the playoffs, they're going all the way.
Going all the way. Well, time can only tell what the future holds for the Trojans team and the future of all of these great things that we've discussed, the future of the Dodgers, the future of the 76ers, the future of USC. It's all so riveting to talk about. You guys were great show hosts. I think I shook my computer a little bit, excuse me, but you guys were great co-hosts to have. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in to Sports Scene. We're here every week on Wednesday at noon Pacific Standard Time to talk about USC sports, to talk about professional sports, all that good stuff. I've been your host, Reagan Griffin, for Brooke, for Skylar. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.